The huge storms that beset the coast of Cornwall not only cause many wrecks in the past, but also result in the wreckage very often being buried by the sand, which is blown up over the inshore sites by the bad weather. Occasionally, during good weather, following the storms, we find that some of these wrecks are not buried, but have been revealed by shifts in the sand. And one of them is this extraordinary wreck of the Schiedam from 1684, which on this dive you can see is almost completely denuded of sand, with the wreckage lying and the concretions lying directly on the rock. This is one of the most dramatic images underwater of this wreck, of a cannon sitting perched on a rocky shelf as if it's actually on a gun carriage. This dates from the 1680s and is incredibly well preserved and normally completely buried under sand. So you can imagine that there are 3, 4, even 5 meters of sand over this site on some occasions. Swimming beyond that, we come across other guns, including this cluster in the center of the site, which are actually not part of the ship's armament, but were cargo that were being carried by the Schiedam from the English colony of Tangier in North Africa, which was being evacuated at this point. And this ship was carrying as much as it could of the guns and ammunition and other equipment being salvaged from that colony and being brought back to England. So these guns actually were probably part of the land armament of Tangier, rather than being anything to do with the ship's weaponry. As well as the guns on the site revealed by the storm were musket balls that you can see here, grenades as well, some of the earliest known grenades embedded in concretion. There were also the concretions of muskets themselves, tools being carried by the workmen who we think were being brought back from Tangier on this ship. Other guns, at least 3 or 4, actually were part of the ship's armaments. The concretions which cover the bottom include anchors, probably railings and other material from the huge mole that was being constructed at Tangier, really anything that they could salvage that might be of value. And much of this is still really unknown to us because it's embedded in concretion, so there may be wonders to be found still underneath the material that you can see on the wreck here. There was also, in addition to the cannon, another type of weapon which we think was probably a bombard or a mortar. And extraordinarily, this huge ball was sitting concreted to the bottom. We think it's a massive ball from one of these guns, perhaps much older than the wreck. These might have been guns salvaged from an earlier period at Tangier. And fascinatingly, as well as finding this ball, we found 2 segments of what we think were, again, either mortars or parts of a bombard, a kind of huge medieval cannon just sitting there on the bottom. And to give an idea of how deep the sand is, prior to this dive we had never seen these on the wreck, so they were completely buried under sand. We need to study them more, but we think that the bore of these segments would match the huge ball that we've just seen. And here are some examples of mortars of that period showing what they may originally have looked like. So a great deal of interest in the armaments of this ship, but also I mentioned the workman. She was carrying all manner of salvage material, some of it probably quite valuable. The piece of marble that I've just touched there probably came from a house. There are sheets and sheets of crumpled lead, which would have been of considerable value, perhaps salvaged from roofs. The other extraordinary thing on this wreck, being so exposed, was that we did find large fragments of timber, including this very big piece of oak, extraordinarily well preserved, and quite incredible to think that there may have been previous periods at this very shallow site when it was exposed to huge wind and weather, but fascinating to find some of the ship's timber in that way as well. There are parts of this wreck that we have yet to investigate properly. Maybe at some point we will have an opportunity to excavate. Cannonball here, perched on a ledge. There may be all manner of other material buried in the concretion and beneath the concretion all around this wreck that will repay further archaeological investigation. One of the most extraordinary discoveries we made was this wooden gun carriage wheel just poking out of the sand. And again, like the ship's timbers, a quite extraordinary find on a wreck which is so exposed that such a fragile organic object should survive on this wreck really is testament to what kind of material we might expect to find on other occasions when wrecks such as this one are revealed by the shifting storms and the sand removes. The Schiedam is of great significance not only for the unique assemblage of artifacts that we've uncovered, but also for the representation of a largely forgotten but very significant episode in English history. The artifacts, including the grenades and the cannon and the tools and some of the other things that we've seen in the film, such as the architectural marble, all represent the occupation of Tangier by the English in the late 17th century. Why it's so significant is that the decision to abandon Tangier, to evacuate the town, to fill ships such as the Schiedam up with material, military and other material from the colony, is part and parcel of a shift of attention away from North Africa and towards India. So the Schiedam really stands at a historical fulcrum which helps to explain everything that happened subsequently in English history and the way we are today, because had the decision been made to remain focused on North Africa, then the story would have been very different. From that point of view, diving on a wreck such as the Schiedam is not just about the artifacts that we find, fascinating though they are, it's also about bringing to life episodes of history which really are not necessarily very well documented and sometimes can give us new and fresh insights into the way that we are today. And really, that story is the same one that could be told for many of the hundreds and hundreds of other wrecks off this coast, each of which are not only fascinating in their own right as wrecks, but also stand somewhere very significantly in history.